Somebody holler, I am your anthropomorphic computer game inspecting ladle, and this is the Game Ladle Show. Coming hot off the heels of the original Force Unleashed's authentic, critically acclaimed, heavy-hitting Star Wars tale, The Force Unleashed 2, a third-person hack-and-slash action-adventure game, dropped onto the scene with a prehistoric meteorite of a thud. Releasing in an age of cinematic set-piece stitched competition, the respected team at LucasArts threw their hat into the ring, forgetting about what made their first foray so special to begin with. The story of The Force Unleashed 2 can be best described as a narrow bridge one drives by on the freeway, bland, undeviating, and mindlessly dull. Even worse, every question raised at the beginning of the story, and in the game's heavy marketing campaign, receives little to no explanation by the end of the narrative. The protagonist embarks on a quest to discover his origins and locate his loved one. By the time the credits roll, only one of these two quests will be fulfilled. Furthermore, when the player is granted the option to choose between one of two potential endings, neither of these quests will be cleared. This is quite the feat. Holding a carrot at the end of a stick, asking a malnourished individual to wait for sustenance, only to then hide the vegetable and claim it had never been important. Even worse, whenever a character from the original game appears, it's met with little to no fanfare, coming and going with nothing more than a sentence or two to explain their existence, and the slightest of acknowledgments toward a friend thought to be long lost. It is only a shame that this would be the lackluster end to characters that had once been so beloved. It is within the gameplay category that Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2 both pales and exceeds the original. The controls have been considerably updated from the first entry. Each of the force-based powers, push, lightning, grip, and the new mind trick, are now available from the start, and the player actually achieves a strong mastery of control over the character on screen. Holding and moving an object with your force powers has been valuably improved. Lightsaber combat, in particular, is rapid and violent, with all new animations that make best use of the protagonist's dual lightsaber combat style. Even by modern standards, fighting and moving as the lead character is fast, fluid, and fun. It is in the game's few set pieces, coarsely paced throughout the brief campaign, where The Force Unleashed 2 is at its brightest, with total chaos and environmental annihilation at the forefront. Each set piece is awe-inspiring and gratifying to complete, unlike the lengthy drudge of that Star Destroyer scene from the last game. None of the action moments here overstay their welcome, choosing to emphasize the intensity of the performance without hampering the mood by shoehorning a drawn-out, quick-time heavy fight into what should have only been a couple minutes long. Some moments, such as the fall of the floating city in level 2, are so spectacular they almost rival their clear God of War and Uncharted muses. However, clear budget and timing restrictions keep this game from ever reaching the dizzying heights of its contemporaries. It is in between the set pieces where the timing and budget restrictions are most apparent. The majority of what the player carries out in The Force Unleashed 2 can best be described as mind-numbingly repetitive. One of the most egregious examples being this moment right here. Repetitive gameplay design appears exceedingly quickly, despite the game's tremendously short runtime. When challenges such as these transpire continuously throughout each level, it not only ruins the flow, but ultimately causes the actions of the protagonist to feel meaningless. When the player has defeated a mini-boss, only to then have the same mini-boss appear seconds later, now with a couple of enemies straggling at its sides, any and all feelings of accomplishment rapidly diminish. Most importantly, empowerment is replaced with frustration and boredom. Defeating the same enemies with the same tools in slightly different ways is fun, for only so long. The Force Unleashed 2 exposes its age quite clearly in its noticeable separation between cutscene and gameplay. Everything from the minor deviations in mouth sync of the superior pre-rendered cutscenes to the momentary fade to black before gameplay, and even the noticeably less defined surroundings and protagonists that have been reserved for gameplay, just screams 7th generation console. Do not, however, let that fool you. The quality of a product should never be judged by the technical limitations of the time. but by the emotional impact bestowed. When it comes to environmental storytelling, the game accomplishes it beautifully when it chooses to. Despite the few graphical hiccups, the intended emotional responses are conveyed convincingly. Walking down a long, ghoulish corridor as the ominous John Williams-esque music peaks in its psycho tones is properly unsettling. Jumping off of a rain-drenched building and falling hundreds of feet towards the ground while narrowly missing hypersonic TIE fighters as intense, romantic music swells communicates an exciting experience. This is regularly true, at least as long as the player does not stop and closely examine their surroundings. Only then does a low-quality texture or numerous duplicated objects in the same location become tormentingly clear. It must be noted that the game did release in a time before the current Star Wars generation, meaning that only 7 Star Wars movies, that includes the animated Clone Wars film, had been released. Therefore, the aesthetics are a golden mix of the 3. Some locations appear straight out of the Clone Wars series. All of the wardrobe and lead character designs bleed the original trilogy, and most of the enemies fought take heavy inspiration from the prequel films. So, as a warning, stimuli from the prequel trilogy is apparent. From stunning water-drenched recreations of Kamino to the various General Grievous-inspired massive robots. While many may dislike this, it would be difficult to argue that the art and designs from the prequels had not been of the highest quality, and The Force Unleashed 2 wastes little time choosing the most outstanding of inspirations to build out their world. Love for the franchise is apparent in every 3D model. However, time restrictions must have held the team back substantially. Even if the first time a player enters a corridor, it's an impeccable experience for the Star Wars hedonist. Seeing the same corridor in another building for the 40th time of the exact same level monumentally damages the product. With lightsaber and upgrade holocrons scattered about each level, one would assume that a heavy amount of exploration would be encouraged, but that's not necessarily true. Instead of finding a Star Wars Easter egg in every inch of this deeply linear game, most of the time if the player looks around the room or goes in a different direction, they'll be met with nothing more than an empty corridor that looks like every other empty corridor in that level. Ignoring the story material, the actors each do a wonderful job portraying their characters. Darth Vader always sounds perfectly menacing, and the lead protagonist is easy to feel connected to, even when he's mostly screeching at the top of his lungs. Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2 is a game with few things to love. One which presents itself with such extreme tedium that to sell the product at full retail price or even half price would be artlessly impotent. However, it has been over 10 years since the release of this game, and as of right now, it is possible to play it and its predecessor on current generation hardware. For Xbox One, this is through their backwards compatibility system, and the PlayStation can stream it through PlayStation Now. What that means is that it's possible to play both Star Wars The Force Unleashed and The Force Unleashed 2 for a grand price of around $10 US. With that in mind, the few things to love about the game are a little bit brighter. Yes, it is a repetitive experience, but fun can be had through mixing up force powers and experiencing the tense action set pieces. If you're in the market for something Star Wars related and nothing is scratching that itch, pick this title and the original up for cheap. It just might be worth it. If you enjoyed this review and want to join the Ladle generation, consider subscribing, and if there's anything you want me to play next, leave a comment down below. What was your experience with The Force Unleashed 2 or the original game? Let me know. Now if you'll excuse me. I have some work to do.